So from the comments, I know that some of you are a lot like me, where long-term goals seem almost impossible to accomplish unless you have some kind of external expectation from maybe a boss, maybe coworkers on a team, or maybe a spouse, right? Those long-term goals where they're not obligations, discretionary time that you have, and you have this big thing that you want to do, this big grand idea that you want to do, and it's not part of your everyday life. That's what I'm talking about. And that's what I'm doing with my book, The Realms of Faith, the adventurous guidebook I wish I'd had as a new disciple, starting an epic quest to storm the gates of hell. And that book I want to have done by my 50th birthday. I have broken this down into 6 principles of how I stay on track with this, which is something that I've not been able to do before, okay? This is new to me. So don't think that I have this all figured out. I'm still learning as I go. But what I have done is I've been able to spend 15 weeks, 14 weeks as of the recording of this. And then when you see this, it'll be 15 weeks. So this is 69 total weeks that I have marked down until my birthday. 14 of these are filled in. I put a color on each day. My green is that, yes, I've done my book work and I'm happy with my book work. Yellow means I've done my book work and I'm not quite happy with where it's gone. And then red means I had planned it, but I missed it. Now I have 17 red marks on here. Now I could look at that and I could say, oh man, I missed 17 days. Or I could look at that and I could say, hey, I'm still marking days. So this is huge. I broke this down into 6 principles that help keep me on track. And I want to go through those. I'll summarize them first, and then we'll go into each one in detail. So the first one is just show up. Like, get your routine down and just show up. You know, pick a time in your day where you can make it a routine and you can consistently do the thing. The second thing, and something I talk about all the time on this channel, is start with the why. What's my purpose, right? And then 3, what beliefs are holding me back? And then how can I reframe those beliefs? 4, what are the tools and techniques that I can use to help in my daily routines? And then I guess part of 4 is, what if I get out of my routine? 5, am I celebrating my wins? This is huge. You know, what does my self-talk look like? And then the last one, realistic reflection and refinement. Am I being realistic as I progress through this? And again, the goal is not perfection. The goal is to get 1% better every day. That's all I'm asking of myself. Learn something new, refine my way of doing things. And I'm doing this to build trust in myself, one step at a time. This last month had a lot of challenges. The day I got done recording was the day that somebody tried to assassinate Trump. And then all of the political garbage that gets in my head, you know, that almost set me off track. And then I have a new contract opportunity I have decided to take. And that means that it's going to be a whole new set of obligations and a whole new set of responsibilities, new routines that I'm going to have to take my routines and fit them into that. And then we had friends visit us at the beginning of the month, and they stayed with us for 3 days. I knew my routine was not going to happen on those days. So let's take these one at a time. Principle number 1, just show up. I need time to think about all this stuff. Last month's video, all about time management. I have my devotional time in the morning, and that includes my journaling, my reflection, my Zettelkasten work. I need to have a good hour to do that. And then I have an hour of book work that I try to do. And then I have an hour to work on video stuff, working on the script, working on these cards. I need a good 3 hours every day. And so I get up early, so I have those 3 hours before I do anything else. Now everybody's not going to be able to do that. You need to come up with your own way of showing up. If you struggle finding that, look back at the last video that I did. Hopefully it'll help you. So principle number 2, start with your why. What's your purpose? If your why is strong enough, then the what and the how becomes doable. You'll find a way. Another thing, am I fulfilling God's purpose for my life? Like David, right? David fulfilled God's purpose for his life in his lifetime. The Pharisees, they did not. They rejected God's purpose for their life. Am I serving people? Am I focusing on his kingdom and his righteousness first and foremost in my life? Viktor Frankl, the Holocaust survivor, he wrote the book Man's Search for Meaning. And this is a paraphrase of what he wrote. I have the actual quote, but in my head, this is the way I understand what he's saying. It's not what is the meaning of life. The whole Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy. What's the meaning of life? Oh, 42. Well, 42, that's nonsense. Well, it's nonsense if you don't know the right questions to ask. That's why I have 42 bins of cards. So Viktor Frankl, he says it's not what is the meaning of life. It's how do I live a life with meaning? We have to ask the right questions. That's what it comes down to for me. Speaking of questions, I have a question from the comments that I picked out. This person asked, basically, how do you find gaps in your Zettelkasten cards? How do you find content ideas that are lurking in your cards? And then is there a systematic way, a series of steps that's reproducible? I don't have a systematic way of doing this consistently, but I do it. One of the things, Greg Koukl, he wrote the book Tactics. In that book, he says in his attempts to do evangelism, he's not trying to win anyone to Christ. He's just trying to put a stone in someone's shoe, something that they have to think about. So what I do is I try to put a stone in my own shoe. You've heard me say it before. The road to truth is paved by asking enough of the right questions. And again, I've said that in another video. You got a stone in your shoe, you dwell on that thought and that question for a while, and eventually you deal with it, and you take that stone, then you drop it. And after doing that, 42 times 1,500 cards, maybe. And the type of questions that I like to ask myself are, why do I care about this so much? What do I want to know? What do others know that I don't know? Why does this bother me? Why does the opposition to this idea or this worldview think the way that they do? That allows me to become articulate in the whys. But when I do this, I have to be prepared for a lot of uncomfortable, overwhelming feelings. That does happen. And then I like to ask questions when I look at a problem. Is this a root cause or is this approximate cause? So let's just say I'm having an argument with my wife and I think it's about something tiny. It's usually never about something tiny. If there's an argument that happens about something tiny, there is almost certainly a root cause, some unresolved issue of the past that is causing this little thing to become a big thing. And we can't just focus on the proximate causes. We need to dig deep to find the root causes. So that's part of the questioning that I do. It's not answering your question specifically, but I hope it's helpful. So principle number 3, what stories am I telling myself? If I'm saying I can't do this, I've never been able to do this, I'm going to fail, that's a misbelief. That just sets us up for failure. As a man thinks within himself, so is he. Proverbs or Psalm. What stories am I telling myself? And then how can I reframe the story to be in the realm of possibility? I've never been able to do this, but that doesn't mean it's impossible. How might I do this? We take the belief, reframe it into a way of possibility, and then we start asking the questions, how? Jordan Peterson wrote this, and he says, as soon as you start thinking things can be better, they automatically are better because your orientation changes. A bad place with a way of escape is positive, even if you're still in a bad place. That gets back to us just believing that we have the potential to have agency over this. And that gives us a huge amount of power, even if we're still stuck in the bad situation. It's pretty awesome. Principle 4, tools and techniques. I've said this over and over again, another time where it's going to be a broken record. The tools by themselves are not going to get you there. And tools can often get in the way because they lead us into this sophisticated procrastination where we're doing stuff, we're busy, so we feel like we're accomplishing what we're trying to accomplish, but sometimes it's just sophisticated procrastination. If your tool is not helping you achieve the goal, like substantially helping you achieve the goal, then the tool is not worth it, in my opinion. You're watching this video probably because you're interested in maybe Zettelkasten, the Bible. So the Zettelkasten, I read a lot more than I've ever read before. I have multiple books that I'm reading at the same time because of the way the Zettelkasten system works, because of the way source notes work, because I can drop something, pick out something else, and come back to it later. Time boxing, ideal day planning, working within the real constraints of my day, right? Of my 16, 17 hours that I have, and making sure that that's realistic and planning for downtime, all of the stuff that I talked about in the last video, it's huge. That's a tool that I continuously use. And then my journaling, writing about my life, writing reflections about things, about even things that I read that are not so much Zettelkasten notes, but that I want to think deeply on, that could become main cards eventually. Questions that I have. A lot of my questions are in my journal. That idea of reflection so that I can refine things. You know, what's working, what's not working. I try to have synergy with all my work. That's another thing about my tools and my techniques and the things that I'm working on. I try to have synergy between those. Like these videos, a lot of the stuff in these videos are from the stuff that I'm writing about in the book, or vice versa. I have stuff that I'm writing in the videos that I want to put in the book. That type of synergy increases productivity exponentially. Sometimes when I'm working on these videos, I'm writing small essays, and those small essays can become parts of chapters or even chapters. Tools and techniques, it's going to be different for everybody. What works for me may not work for you. What if I get out of my routine? What if I get out of the routine of using my tools? When my friends came to visit for those 3 days, after they visited, it was hard for me to get back into my routine because I'd been away from it for a few days. What I'm realizing is I need to plan a day or two to get back into this. Maybe I need to reflect on, how do I feel about the time that I've had away? Why am I finding it harder to get back into this? Did I not record a save state? And that probably would have helped. The new job, the new contract work that I have, I'm going to have, again, new tasks, new responsibilities. What are my expectations? Am I going to be able to use these tools the same way at the same time? We'll have to see. Usually onboarding, takes a little more effort, takes a little more time away from, and I might have to eat into that first 3 hours a little bit. Principle number 5, am I celebrating my wins? How am I interpreting the outcomes that I'm producing? Again, I could look at my writing plan and I could focus on all the red days and all the yellow days, but the fact that I'm still marking the days is huge. It's huge. How am I celebrating my wins? Yeah, huge. So look for ways to celebrate your wins. I watched a video, Dr. Izzy Seeley, where she talks about what she calls the belief outcome axis, where she talks about outcomes come from our actions, actions come from our intentions and our decisions, and those intentions and decisions come from our thoughts and our feelings, and those thoughts and our feelings come from the stories and beliefs about ourselves, and then those stories and beliefs come from life events and the way we interpret those life events in our life, and then those ultimately become our outcomes. We have a lot of agency over some of those things. How am I thinking about things? How am I interpreting things? What stories am I telling myself? What beliefs or misbeliefs do I have? Based on all those things, what can I do? What is my intention and what am I deciding to do because of the reframing of those things? It's a really good video. I think her video, is titled something about journaling. But look her up, Dr. Izzy Seeley, journaling. It's really good, especially the first part of that. And then she talks about journaling, the lots of different ways to journal, which I found some of them very interesting. That first part, the belief outcome axis, is pretty awesome. Thank you for that, Izzy, if you ever see this video. What having the feeling of agency allows us is to turn this cycle into a virtuous cycle, where the good outcome produces more good thoughts. It's this virtuous cycle of growth. That can also be a vicious cycle if we're telling ourselves bad stories. If we are interpreting the life events wrong, it can become a vicious cycle. So we want to reframe our thinking to make that a virtuous cycle. So kind of how the techniques and the celebration kind of work together is, if I can make things as simple as possible, where I almost cannot fail, and then I celebrate achieving that, then that virtuous cycle has these feedback loops, quicker feedback loops. And then as I grow more and more, I'm developing new ways of dealing with things. I'm learning new tools. So take, for instance, my book. By the time I'm 50, and I want to write a book. The first thing I did, well, not the first thing I did, I actually started developing a plan, and then my plan wasn't good. I didn't think. And so what I did is I looked for a book about writing the kind of book that I want to write. And I found one, and it was great. So that was kind of my first step. Just simple. I can read about writing. Now, we don't want to get stuck in sophisticated procrastination again, right? Because that can become too long of a thing. So give yourself a deadline on these simple steps and then celebrate. Yes, I did that. What that book helped me do is develop a plan of attack, a draft of a plan, and then ultimately turn that into real achievable things that I can do. And then eventually working that into my 1 hour a day, working on this, coming up with a proposal for the book, which I have, which I want to share with you pretty soon. You'll be my alpha and beta readers. And if you consistently help me, work through this book, I'll make sure you get copies of the book. But the proposal I want to share with you is not quite done. It's close. And I will share that on the, help this book tool that I've talked about previously. And those with either a Patreon level or a Mighty Network level, depending on what tool I decide to use, then you'll have access to that. And then, celebrating those steps. The last principle that I can think of right now is realistic reflection and refinement. Reflection allows for refinement. Recording some kind of stats allows for refinement. That's why, I have the book plan with the colors, with the highlighted days on there. I can see my progress, and I can see weeks that haven't been so good. I can look back at my journal, find out what was going on in that week, why it wasn't that good. I can reflect on those things, and then I can refine my future weeks 1% better all the time. So this principle, being realistic. Like there have been a few things that I haven't been realistic about. One is these videos, right? I thought, 2 weeks, I can get one done in 2 weeks. No, too short. 3 weeks? No, too short. 4 weeks? Yeah, it's about perfect. Another thing in the book, I was hoping to have my first draft done by 2025 and then work on future drafts. And I realized that I am not going to actually be able to get that first draft done the way that I want to do it until May. And that doesn't leave me a whole lot of time, May, June, July, August, for refining this. But I kind of have a plan. I'll be releasing the chapters as I do them to my beta readers, alpha readers, and I'll be working through those gradually as I'm working on new chapters as well. Maybe that's not realistic. We'll have to see. But I really want to get it done by my 50th birthday. And this is, this leads to a lot of urgency. And when, urgency produces dopamine and continues to keep me motivated, which is a good thing. So that's another thing about, reflecting on how you're doing. This is my goal, and these are the realistic timeframes that I have. I am naive about things that I don't know. What is the saying? The entrepreneur is someone who is naive enough to not doubt that they could actually do it. So to review, 1, show up. 2, start with the why. What's my purpose? 3, what stories am I telling myself? How can I reframe those stories, turn them into possibilities? 4, what tools and techniques can I put into place that are not leading me into sophisticated procrastination? What tools work for me? 5, celebrate the wins, because we want that to be a virtuous cycle. If we can make those steps small enough, then those feedback loops can be quick. And then 6, realistic reflection and refinement. So those are the 6 principles that I have come up with. Stay tuned, alpha and beta readers. I may have it in the show notes about signing up for the email newsletter, joining the community. I have lots of ideas for the community, but I don't want to get ahead of myself. Keep an eye out for that. Something will be happening pretty soon, Lord willing. Keep seeking his face. God bless.